continuing in our series of the kings of Judah, and what we can learn from them, and how we know we have a better king in Jesus has been the theme of this study. And so today, this morning, I want to start by asking a question. The question is how long have you been? What's the thing you've been most dedicated to in your life? What is the thing you've dedicated for the longest, with the most level of devotion, given as much of it as you can? Now, you might look at that and say, well, maybe our Christianity, right? Maybe we can think about our faith and the way we've done that. But think about that. Has it been maybe your job? You spent a lot of time devoting yourself to your job, whatever that might be. Maybe you've had several jobs throughout your years. How long is the thing you've dedicated your most of your life to? Could it be school? Kristen was about to celebrate today that she's dedicated a lot of time and effort to school. Finally done. With that, all right, we've got to think about the idea of dedication. One of the things that kind of comes up is, especially since we are speaking in the political realm and the political sphere of the kings of Judah, we got to consider for a second how quickly we shift from our American public policies, right? Like, our policies do seem to shift because it's every 8 years, maybe 4 to 8 years, we get a new person in there who decides to change things. And it's important to note that because we don't have a sense of, man, what is it like to really dedicate our whole kingdom, our whole life, our whole government, especially in these days, to something consistently over a long lifespan, a long period of time. And so I want you to think about dedication in this way, in this idea of how important it is to dedicate and dedicate for a long period of time. Because we're going to continue in our story. As you know, we've been speaking through the kings of Judah, and we've been going down, and we're going to skip a couple of rulers in the kings of Judah. You'd think that this would be a long time, right? Maybe 50, 60, 70 years, right? A long time. Well, actually, we're only going to go ahead 6 years into the future of the story. And so what has happened in this 6 years of time is you had one ruler who took place. One ruler came about, and he only lasted 1 year. And that was Ahaziah, however you pronounce that, Ahaziah. And Ahaziah is replaced and actually usurped by Athaliah, who is a queen, who is the queen mother, and she is considered an illegitimate ruler. And so for 5 years, she is an illegitimate ruler of Judah. And so you can imagine what's going on in Judah at this time, as the whole peoples, they lose a ruler who is a bad ruler. They get another ruler who's not so great. He only lasts a year, and now we're under an illegitimate reign. And what's going to happen? And how are things going to all come about? And so we get to this ruler, this one ruler who is Joash. And Joash is a good king, sort of. He's sort of a good king. We'll get to what that really means here in a little bit. But he's sort of a good king. And the interesting thing is how does Joash come about? Because Joash comes about, again, he comes about in sort of a coup in manners that there's this illegitimate queen on the throne. She's not really recognized as a true ruler of Judah, even in the history books. And so in this time, there's like, how do we get this king on the throne? Well, Joash, all right, Joash is made king when he is 7 years old. All right, so you can imagine what's going on with a 7-year-old and how we get a 7-year-old on the throne, and that usually is not made by the 7-year-old himself. Okay, I mean, I can only imagine if a 7-year-old comes up and, all right, I'm the ruler now, right? Like, that's not how that works, right? That's not really how that happens. And so we have to understand how he gets made king by really understanding a man named. Sorry, I'm lost my notes here. Okay, Jehoiada. Right, Jehoiada. We have to understand from a man named Jehoiada. He is the high priest. He's a priest in Judah, and he is a man of courage. It says in verse 2 of chapter 23 in Chronicles, right, that he went about through Judea and gathered the Levites from all the cities of Judah and the heads of fathers of house of Israel, and they came to Jerusalem. And this took courage. All right, this took courage because Jehoiada is of course under an illegitimate rule. He's an illegitimate ruler, and she's not great, right? We'll just put that out there. Her reputation, she's not a great ruler. And then, of course, it takes courage to try and overthrow this not great ruler right underneath her nose, right? That's the whole idea. He's trying to do this while she can't. And so Jehoiada, in chapter 23, puts together this whole plan, which I'm not going to read it because it's kind of hard to contemplate it, but I'm going to kind of spell it out for how it is Jehoiada gets all the Levites to come to Jerusalem. It's all the Levites to come, and this is how he's going to put Joash as king. He gets all of them to come, and he separates them out. He gets them to guard the temple and to guard Joash and to guard, and he puts them all in place so that they can set up Joash as king. And it says in verse 4 through 5. Well, let's actually read verse 3. Verse 3 tells us why he does it. It says, "And all the assembly made a covenant with the king in the house of God." This is Joash the king. "And Jehoiada said to them, Behold the king's son. Let him reign as the Lord spoke concerning the sons of David." All right, so we have Jehoiada's motive for a second, is that he's doing this because this is David's son, right? He is the lineage of David. He's the rightful king. And so Jehoiada looks at it and says, man, we are not going to do what is wrong here by having an illegitimate ruler. We're going to have David's son on the throne the way it's supposed to be, right? The way that this is supposed to happen. And so he has the courage to do that. And then verse 4 through 5 says this. It says, "This is the thing that you shall do of you priests and Levites who come off duty on the Sabbath, and on the third shall be 1/3 shall be gatekeepers, and 1/3 shall be at the king's house, and 1/3 at the gate of the foundation. And all the people shall be in the courts of the house of the Lord." All right, and so he sets all this up, right? He's got all three of them out there, and he's got it all protected. He's got it all well taken care of. And then in verse 11, if we scoot down to there through the plan, it says in verse 11, "Then they brought out the king's son and put the crown on him and gave him the testimony, and they proclaimed him king. And Jehoiada and his sons anointed him, and they said, Long live the king." All right, and so again, this is brash moment right here. Okay, Jehoiada under the nose of the illegitimate ruler. They get the king in place. They get all the peoples around it. They get the legitimacy of the Levitical priesthood to set him up, and they all stand around and protect him. And then they say, "This is our king. This is the king. That's it. Long live the king." Now you can imagine how Athaliah might feel about this when she hears that this happens, right? She may not exactly like that she's being usurped, right? Most people don't. But this is the thing that happens to her, as we see in the later part of the chapter, in verse 12. It says, "When Athaliah heard the noise of the people running and praising the king, she went into the house of the Lord to the people. And when she looked, there was the king standing by his pillar at the entrance, and the captains and the trumpeters beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets, and the singers with their musical instruments leading in the celebration. And Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, 'Treason! Treason!'" So she's a little miffed about this, right? "Then Jehoiada the priest brought out the captains who were set over the army, saying to them, 'Bring her out between the ranks, and anyone who be put to death, Lord.' For the priest said, 'Do not put her to death in the house of the Lord.' So they laid hands on her, and she went out into the entrance of the horse gate of the king's house, and they put her to death there." So here we have it, right? Coup, reform, the execution of the old leader. Things are completely reshaped and redone, and the whole direction of the last 6 years is reestablished in the line of David, and Judah is going the direction that they're supposed to go. All right, and so if that's the case, right, we'd think that there's some hope here, right? There's some good hope in how this is going to happen. In fact, if we see to the rest of the chapter, Jehoiada starts making reform. And this is the problem that we're going to find here later in the story, is that because the king is only 7 years old, I don't expect the king to be making good policy, right? I mean, I shall declare candy every night for dinner, right? Like that would be kind of the thought there, right? Like that's what the king wants, But so really, what it does is it sets up a puppet king here, right? A puppet ruler. Jehoiada is pulling the strings, and to Jehoiada's credit, Jehoiada is a good, honorable man. He's a good priest. He's a good steward to the king, and with his reform, he pulls Israel back to where they should be. They start tearing down idol worship. They start following the law. They start doing all the things that they're supposed to be doing. And so under his stewardship, things are good. And let's read the rest of the chapter as it says, and Jehoiada made a covenant between himself and all the people, and the king, that they should be the Lord's people. Then all the people went to the house of Baal and tore it down, his altars, his images. They broke in pieces, and they killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And Jehoiada posted watchmen for the house of the Lord under the direction of the Levitical priests and the Levites, whom David had organized to be in charge of the house of the Lord, to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, as it is written in the law of Moses, with rejoicing and with singing, according to the order of David. He stationed the gatekeepers at the gates of the house of the Lord, so that no one should enter who was in any way unclean. And he took the captains, the nobles, the governors of the people, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king down from the house of the Lord, marching through the upper gates of the king's house. And they set the king on the royal throne. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet after Athaliah had been put to death with the sword. And so we see this, right? Everything's going well. The people are rejoicing. The people are tearing down the things they shouldn't be following. They're starting to do things the way that Moses proclaimed they should do, right? It's all going right. But then we get to chapter 24, and this is the sad reality of Joash's reign. We see in verse 2, but we'll read verse 1. It says, Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba. And Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, right? This is great. He reigns for 40 years. All of this sounds wonderful, beautiful. But there's a problem. And this is the foreshadowing of that problem, is that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. And he did it all the days of Jehoiada the priest because Jehoiada, who's pulling the strings, has made these commitments that these things are going to happen. And he's decided the direction of the kingdom, and he's doing this for the sake of Joash, so that Joash will know what is right and what is good. And he's been a good teacher, and he has been a good helper to Joash to make good decisions. But the sad truth is that Jehoiada is older than Joash by a long stretch. And Jehoiada eventually has to die, because that's the way humans go. Humans die. And so unfortunately, we see later in chapter 24, verse 15 through 16, it says here, it says, But Jehoiada grew old and full of days, and he died. He was 130 years old at his death, and they buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel toward God and his house. And so now here comes the point where we now have Jehoiada is gone, Jehoiada the good leader, and Joash is now on his own. Right? His teacher is gone, and the question is what is Joash really going to do with himself? What is he really devoted to? What does he really have dedication towards? Is it towards the things of the Lord? Did he hear his teacher? Did he listen and respond? Or does he do his own thing and decide, I'm going to go my own way. I'm going to do what I want to do. And so in verse 17, we sadly see that Joash immediately gives way. So let's look at verse 17. It says, Now after the death of Jehoiada, the princes of Judah came and paid homage to the king. And the king listened to them. And they abandoned the house of the Lord, God of their fathers, and served the Asherim and idols. And the wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for his guilt and theirs. Yet he sent prophets among them to bring them back to the Lord, and these testified against them that they would not pay attention. And so here it is, Joash, his teacher is gone, and he immediately starts falling away. He immediately starts following after his his friends, the princes, the people that are giving him the advice to go after all the idols. It all sounds good, and he is just led full-blown astray. It doesn't even seem like it took him a year, right? It just seems like it was immediate. I mean, literally, Jehoiada is rolling over in his grave as Joash falls away in this. As Joash falls away and decides that's not for me, I'm not doing that. I mean, what an egregious response to your teacher to just throw that away. And yet, that's not the worst of it. If we look back at verse 20, it says, Then the Spirit of God clothed Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, the priest, and he stood above the people and said to them, Thus says God, why do you break the commandments of the Lord so that you cannot prosper? Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you. But they conspired against him, and by command of the king, they stoned him with stones in the court of the house of the Lord. Thus Joash the king did not remember the kindness that Jehoiada, Zechariah's father, had shown him, but killed his son, and when he was dying, he said, "May the Lord see and avenge." Does that not make your heart sink just a little bit? It's the idea that here it is that Jehoiada has done everything for Joash to be successful, to follow the Lord, to teach him. He's done everything to raise him up in the direction of the Lord, and the second he dies, he goes ahead and abandons all of that. And the one person you think might still have influence is the son of the man who treated him so well, right? The man who treated him so well, who set him up. That would be the one person. If he's not going to listen to any other prophets, he's going to listen to that guy. And what does he do? He stones him to death. He says, "I don't want to hear it. I don't want any of that. Leave that, leave me alone. Stop talking about these things." And all the while, Judah is failing and desperate, and all the things are going awry all around him. And we've talked about that in previous lessons, how it's like there's a correlation between you abandon the Lord, and then things start to go bad, and things start to crumble, and things aren't prospering. And so we see it just, what an egregious way, right? What an egregious way to treat your teacher, to treat his legacy, to treat the way he's set you up. And so that's what we see in Joash's response here. What treachery. And the sad thing is, really, it's just and yet it's sad all at the same time, is that the end of the chapter, which we won't read, is Joash is assassinated for it. I mean, he doesn't last very long after Zechariah is stoned to death. He's assassinated by the people because of what he did. Because of his treachery towards Zechariah, the people, there's a plot, and they assassinate him, and they take him out, and he's gone. And they take him out, and so again, we kind of think about this, and it's like, how did this happen? How did this come about? And the question we have to ask ourselves is there anyone else in Scripture like this? Is this completely and wholly unique? Or do we remember a certain fellow that we seem to bring up often? If you recall in Luke chapter 22, 44 through 47, or sorry, 47 through 48, my apologies. Right, we see what Judas does. In verse 44, it says, "And beginning and being in agony and praying more earnestly, his sweats became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. And when he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said to them, 'Why are you sleeping? Rise and pray that we may not enter into temptation.' And while he was still speaking, there came a crowd, and the man called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. And he drew near to Jesus to kiss him. And that's how he betrayed him, right? That's how Judas treated Jesus. And there's an interesting note, though, that we need to understand about Judas, is that Judas was not a man who had this all in his heart and then just suddenly decided to just go out against that, right? We look at John chapter 12, 4 through 6, right? We get another story about Judas. In 12, 4 through 6, we see that, "But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, who was about to betray him, said, 'Why was this anointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?' And he said, 'This is not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it.'" And so we see in Judas a heart that I think is similar, and we see in what's Joash, is that there is convenience, there is the ability to prosper by going along with the things that are presented, right? That Jesus was an opportunity for Judas to sneak from the money box, right? There was some opportunity as he went there. He might have believed it partly, but really the level is he really didn't, and his heart was not fully committed to it. Just like Joash, right? There's convenience, right? He's made king by Jehoiada at 7 years old. What does he know, right? What does he know about being a godly man, right? He's a 7-year-old. And he's raised up and he's put in all these things. And you know what? Jehoiada's direction made him king and made him a prosperous king. And that's really probably what he found out and realized and knew. What does he know about being a faithful person, even all his life? And when the moment comes, when it's him and God, when it's what I'm going to do versus what I'm supposed to do, Joash abandons and makes the decision to go after his own desires. Judas because things were not, strove on his heart, written on his heart. God makes the decision, the selfish decision to just go for what he wants, right? Go for what he desires. And so it's a sad state of things. It's a sad state for a person to be there, but it's a reality that we can look like we're following. We can look like we're faithful until the chips are down. And the reality is that it exposes that your heart's really not in it. Your heart's really not there after it. And that's a thing that we have to be able to measure against ourselves. We talked this morning in Hebrews about how the Word can expose all those things, and how the Word is there. It can expose what's really going on. We can't hide that motive. And the reality is there's no hiding. If you're really not after this life, if you're really not after it, it's going to come out. It's going to come to a head, and you'll abandon it when it's not convenient anymore. You'll abandon it when that's not time for it anymore. And we have to understand that. Jesus understood this as he calls out in Matthew 15:1 through 9. 15:1 through 9, he's being talked to about traditions and commandments. And Jesus says this. He says, Then the Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, Why do you disciples break the tradition of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat. And he answered them, And why do you break the commandments of God for the sake of your traditions? For God commanded, Honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. But you say, if anyone tells his father or his mother, what you would have gained from me is given to God, he need not honor his father, but for the sake of your traditions you have made void the word of God. You hypocrites! Well did Isaiah prophesy of you when he said, This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine the commandments of men. And so Isaiah said it, and Jesus reiterates it, that there is a reality that there are people who honor with their lips, but their hearts are far from God. They honor with their lips because it's convenient. They honor for their lips because, for whatever reason, it benefits them. But when the reality comes, when the chips are down, their hearts are not with God. And that is a reality. That was a reality in Isaiah's day. That's a reality in Jesus' day, and it was a reality in Joash's day that the Lord's commands, the Lord's character, desire, all that was him was not imbued on his heart. That he did not have a desire for God the way God wanted. And so the question then arises is that what are we supposed to do, right? How am I supposed to fix this? How is this supposed to be something that I get out of me? How do I change that? And Jesus is our solution to that. He gave us something better. If you look at Hebrews chapter 8, Hebrews chapter 8, this is the solution that we have in Jesus, is that he gave us a better covenant. In verse 6 of chapter 8, it says, But as it is, Christ has obtained a ministry that is as much more excellent than the old as the covenant he mediates is better, since it is enacted on better promises. For if the first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion to look for a second. For he finds fault with them when he says, Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will establish a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. For they did not continue in my covenant, and so I showed my concern for them, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. After those days, declares the Lord, I will put my law into their minds and write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall not teach each one his neighbor, each one of his brothers, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, for the least of them to the greatest. For I will be merciful towards their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. And so this is the characterization of the new covenant that we have with Christ, is that we are going to have that written on our hearts, written on our minds, that we will know. I shouldn't have to teach you because you'll know. Right? That's the characteristic of the covenant we now have in Christ. And consider how different that is to the covenant under Israel, right? He explains that by showing what happened in the wilderness, right? With the wilderness and with Israel, that he gave them a covenant and they immediately abandoned it, right? They immediately abandon it because out of faithlessness. But with that, like, look at where Joash stood, right? When we compare ourselves to Joash here, Joash had a covenant that he inherited, which was typical, right? It's a covenant he inherits. He doesn't know anything about it at 7 years old, and he certainly didn't learn about it enough as he grew older. Sometimes, even if you look at Israel's history, they don't even have the law in their possession to know it. Sometimes it got lost. Amazing as that is, how do you lose the law of God, right? I mean, we think about that now. Like, how would we lose all of our Bibles? There's quite a few of them. You can probably, go around. I mean, how many in this town alone, right? How many in this building alone? You have plenty of copies of the Bible available, and yet Israel loses it. And so Joash is in a position where, again, it's just the idea of knowing the law, knowing the Lord, and that's a complicated thing to know as it is. We know that by our own studies, right? We don't know everything all the time, and we kind of chide ourselves for not knowing every verse all the time, but it's a complicated book. It's a lot to know. It's a lot to remember, right? And it's constant work to do that. And God says, I'm going to write it on their hearts, and I'm going to write it on their minds. I'm going to give it to them so that they will know it. They will know me, right? That's the covenant that we have with Christ, that we will know him. And so there's some things that are implicated in that. First off, we talked about in the last couple lessons, we've talked about how it's on our shoulders. Right? It's our responsibility. If we want to know it, we've got to know it, right? We've got to do the work. We've got to dig in. We've got to find out what God's word says. But there's a reality, right? There's a reality that when we talk about being a Christian and saying, I'm going to be a Christian, this is my choice to be here, right? I've chosen to be here. Nobody is making me. I mean, when I was a teenager, my parents, yes, they made me. I can't skip out if I didn't want to. but nobody makes me now, right? I can do whatever I want to do. I have that. We live in a free country. I live in a free place where I could decide not to be a preacher, not to be a Christian if I wanted to. I make a conscious choice to be a Christian. You make a conscious choice to be here. Nobody is forcing you. Nobody is making you come here. You are allowed to be here because you want to be. And when we talk about wanting to be here versus an obligation to be here, it's all the difference in the world, isn't it? It's all the difference in the world in how we treat and approach our faith. Joash didn't really have a choice. Joash was under Jehoiada's guidance, and Jehoiada made those decisions, right? Jehoiada made the covenant with the people to be the Lord's people, to bring them to tear down the Baals. And Joash was going along for the ride, wasn't he? He was going along for the ride, and hey, he gets to be king. And Jehoiada makes all the decisions. So, great for me. I get to run around in the palace or whatever that looks like, right? Joash didn't really have a choice in the matter. We do. And the way that we come to this covenant is we choose to be with Jesus. We have to look at Jesus. We have to look at the promise, at the truth of Scripture, and we have to determine whether that's going to be my choice or not. Right? I have to know why I'm making the decision, right? We come to be baptized and to be under the covenant. We have come and chosen that, each one of us, for ourselves, to walk in as Christ walked. We had to come to the decision by knowledge, right? You don't just get baptized because you get baptized, right? We don't become Christians just because somebody had to teach you that. Someone had to walk you through the steps and tell you how this happens. They had to show you what it was like to walk as a Christian. And some of you got to have that from your youth, as myself, and God be praised, that's a blessing. Some of you had to come to that later on in life, right? You had to come and figure that out. But all of you came to know that through your own discernment and your own decisions of the facts in front of you. Okay? That was not something that you were forced into. And because we made that decision, because we have the promise that we will know Jesus. We have all of his mind, right? We talked about that too. We have his mind in the book. We have everything, the mind of Christ available to us. We know him. He is one we can know everything about his thoughts, his desires, his choices. And with that, he will remember our sins no more. That's the promise return on this choice. The promise return on this choice is we will be given mercy. And that's not just an incentive, not some big grand prize to dupe us into some sort of life of servitude. It's a relational thing. It's a relational thing that God says, I want to have mercy on you who know me. I want you to know me so that you'll know the kind of mercy I want to give, I desire to give, I hope to give to you. I'm just itching to give it to every single one of you. But you got to come and you got to find out. You got to know me and you got to make the decisions for yourself. And so that's how we can be better citizens under Christ. That's how, as again, if we take the responsibility on our shoulders to know the Word, that as better citizens, that this approach is so that we can know the character and mind of Christ, that we can know the character and mind of Christ so that we might reflect that we might be similar to that, so that we can bring others to that we are dedicating ourselves to a choice we've made. And this is not a choice that we make lightly. This can't be a choice that we make lightly. This can't be a choice we make because, hey, you know what, I like the people in the building, right? This can't be a choice we make because, there's nothing better out there. We can't make this choice because, I really just need some sort of social structure. No, we make this choice because there's a God out there who wants to know us, and He is worth knowing. He's worth knowing, and we want to know everything about Him because He's there giving us that. He's there giving it to us so that we can write it on our hearts, that we can hold Him dear and cherish Him as we walk along beside Him. That's how we become better citizens, because if we will practice that, if that will be the shining example that is our lives, does that not sound appealing? Does that not sound enticing? That we might be able to share that to someone else, that someone else might be able to look at it and say, man, the God you serve is so different from those other examples, right? He's so different than those other reflections, even of Christ in Christendom, right? He's so different than Buddha and from Allah and from all these other things. You know what? It's so much better than just struggling to deny He exists. There's something about that I want to know. How does that make you the way you are? And if we can do that, then again, people will flock to want to know a God that we can demonstrate that we know. And so with that, we have a king who is a better king than Joash, because his dedication to us, not our dedication to him, his dedication to us is far greater than we will ever know. And we get to reflect that dedication in our lives. We get to reflect that as we walk closer with Him, to know Him, to seek Him out, to understand better His character and His quality. And we get to reflect that quality, and we get to teach others that quality, and we get to, again, show how good that quality is in life. This morning, if you want that relationship, if that's where you want to be, all right, then I'm here to tell you that starts and begins with your relationship with Christ. That starts by getting to know what His Word says, the message of His gospel, and responding to that gospel. We respond to that gospel through baptism, by dying to ourselves and being buried with Him, that we might be raised to newness of life. If you haven't made that step, if that's not where you're at, I want you to know Jesus. I want you to be enticed by Him. I want you to love His character, to want to know everything that He has given you, which is everything. This morning, if there's any way we can help you with that, if there's anything else you're struggling with, let us know, because we want to know that you might know Christ better as we stand and we sing.